They are the most vulnerable and desperate of patients.
And a Channel 4 I-Team investigation is about to reveal what happened to them inside the walls of a state mental institution. Some of it is so disturbing, families are asking, how could this happen to the mentally ill? Our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley, is here now with the results of a 4-month investigation.
Well, this number may sum it up. Our investigation found in the past 3 years, 65 disciplinary actions have been taken. Employees either fired, suspended, or disciplined for abuse, neglect, or mistreatment of patients or failing to manage patients at risk. What we've uncovered are cases of patients being mistreated, touched sexually, and one patient left alone long enough to take his own life. This is how the family of Cody Skelton likes to remember him, a talented bass player hamming it up on a public access channel. But Cody also had a different side, and last November, the mental illness that Cody had struggled with his entire life took over once again.
Well, he was in an uncontrollable state. He was just losing it.
Threatening to harm himself, Cody was first taken to the nearest hospital on November 27th, according to his family. They don't know why, but Cody was then sent to the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. Like so many of the patients here, Cody didn't have insurance, and the institution was the last resort for him to get help.
And I thought, fantastic, thank goodness. The people, thank goodness that he's there at the hospital. There'll be people there, professionals, they'll be able to look after him and take care of him.
On the morning of November 29th, Cody drowned himself inside the state institution.
I just want to know what happened.
It's a question that can be asked not only about Cody's death. How is it other mentally ill patients can be left alone for almost an hour? How could another patient be touched sexually by a nurse? Or how a patient who suffered from sexual abuse could be doused with a trash can of water by another nurse? The Channel 4 I-Team found all that and more happening to mentally ill patients in a facility run by the state. It's all something the CEO of the institute doesn't want to talk about. Why won't you talk to me about what happened to the patients here?
If they can't take care of him, they can't take care of the others. It scares you.
Cody's autopsy, which we obtained through public records requests, explains his terrible death. Cause of death: drowning. Manner of death: suicide. The autopsy shows Cody secured his head inside an overflowing toilet and drowned himself. A bedsheet secured the bathroom door shut. Those terrible details are important to know, Cody's family says, because it shows Cody was unmonitored long enough to plan and pull off an elaborate death.
Sometimes I feel angry, sometimes I feel confused, but mostly I just want to know what happened.
The institution will not release to Cody's family or to the Channel 4 I-Team their internal investigation into his death or explain how often Cody was monitored. But their own internal policies for handling management of patients at risk states when a patient is placed on suicide precautions, the patient shall be monitored constantly and the bathroom should be locked at all times. Again, the institution won't say if they deemed Cody suicidal, but remember, just 2 days earlier, he threatened to harm himself.
Cody needed help.
And internal disciplinary records obtained by the Channel 4 I-Team raise serious questions of how other patients were treated. One report states a nurse straddled a male patient and took his hands and rubbed them on her chest, thighs, and back. The nurse denied doing it, but admitted she kissed him and was suspended. Yet just 4 months later, that same nurse was fired for failing to check on 2 patients for nearly an hour, patients who were supposed to be under intense observation. Then there's this nurse, suspended for pulling on a female patient's arms to get her out of bed, and then dumping a trash can of water on the patient's head. The report reads the nurse's actions had the potential to re-traumatize the patient with a history of physical and sexual abuse. And then there's this report of another nurse suspended when she and her patient were found having their hands around the other's shoulders and neck area. At the end of the encounter, the patient was observed to be lying on the floor. Miss Gilligan? after the CEO of the state institution, Candace Gilligan, refused our repeated requests for an on-camera interview. We went to the institute to get answers.
I wanted to speak to you about the cases of the patients here. Ma'am, please let me talk to you about what happened.
Talk to you, sorry.
Why won't you talk to me about what happened to the patients here?
A spokesman for the State Department of Mental Health, which oversees the institution, said in an email, quote, "The security of patients and staff are a great concern, and patient abuse is something we take very seriously." As for Cody's family, they've now hired an attorney, hoping to force the state to produce answers.
The family has a lot of questions about the care he received.
And try to come to terms with the violent end to their loved one's life.
I'm missing. I want my brother back. I want my brother back.
A state agency is facing serious questions tonight about what appear to be widespread problems at a state mental health institution.
The problems were first revealed in a Channel 4 I-Team investigation last night. Patients left unsupervised, mistreated, or in one instance, left alone to die. Our chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley is here with more on what he's uncovered.
Well, the head of the mental health agency was just summoned to the office of a senior lawmaker who sits on a state committee that oversees the institution. And tonight, an insider reveals even more about conditions for patients and employees at that state institution.
I'm Jeremy Finley with Channel 4. Wanted to see if I could talk to you. I know that you just had a meeting with the senator about this.
I really don't have a comment to make.
Mental Health Commissioner Doug Varney wasn't expecting to see the Channel 4 I-Team outside his meeting with Senator Doug Henry last Thursday. The Channel 4 I-Team shared our findings with Senator Henry about what we uncovered happening inside that state institution. Findings that include a nurse sexually touching a patient and another nurse pulling on a patient and dumping a trash can of water on that patient's head. We also found incidents that raise questions of how often nurses were checking on seriously mentally ill patients, including a nurse disciplined for not checking on 2 patients for nearly an hour, patients who needed intense observations, and the death of patient Cody Skelton, who was left alone long enough to drown himself within the institution.
Well, I think it's very distressing. You wouldn't want any of your family, I wouldn't want any of my family in an institution where this kind of thing can happen to them.
I really don't have a comment to make.
Well, I think it's important. The state obviously is the agency that oversees this hospital. Are you concerned about what happened to these patients?
I'm always concerned about what happens to our patients.
And what about in these specific cases?
These specific cases have been dealt with. They've been addressed. Our staff do a great job at the hospital. These were isolated incidents. They were dealt with. Thank you.
But numbers just released by the state to the Channel 4 I-Team raise questions about just how isolated those incidents were. In 3 years, 65 disciplinary actions have been handed down for employees who were either fired, suspended, or disciplined for things like abuse, neglect, or mistreatment of patients, or failing to manage patients at risk. We've asked the state for explanations on all those incidents. In the meantime, the Channel 4 I-Team has just obtained another disciplinary report, this time for a charge nurse last September who lost track of a patient. That's right, lost track of a mentally ill patient inside the institution. The disciplinary letter says the patient was not brought back from what's called the treatment mall, where patients get therapy and have group sessions. The patient was left alone for hours, unwatched, unaccounted for, inside the treatment mall. He was finally found at 7:25 p.m. The disciplinary report says the incident is very serious and demonstrates a weakness in staff accounting for our patients' locations at all times.
It's getting crazy, it's getting out of hand, they don't have enough staff.
This former employee, who asked us to conceal her identity because she still works in the mental health field, says she left the hospital because of a lack of staff.
Staffing is just an issue, and that they've brought that up, and what they're being told is, budget, state budget cuts. You have to work with what you got.
And state records show there have been cuts. 53 positions eliminated at the institution, including security guards, a security chief, 2 nurses, and perhaps the most telling, 14 psychiatric technicians who keep patients from injuring themselves or others. A spokesman for the Department of Mental Health stated in an email, quote, "We have reviewed staffing patterns and they are consistent with industry standards established by the Joint Commission. We consistently met or exceeded these standards in our hospitals. And as for what should happen to employees who mistreat patients,"
What was your message to the commissioner about this?
My message was that I'd like to see them all gone as soon as you can get rid of them. And he agreed.
We've also learned staff are getting injured as well. 120 staff members injured in the past 3 years.
You pay their salaries, and their jobs are some of the most important in the state.
But a Channel 4 I-Team investigation found in several cases you've paid state employees to sleep. And we have the photographs that prove it. Here's our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley.
Well, the photographs you're about to see were taken by a former employee of the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute from inside the facility. We've been investigating cases of patient neglect there, including the recent death of a patient. And now, former employees are coming forward to say there's a reason some patients haven't been checked on, because the people assigned to watch them were asleep.
Oh, wow, that's terrible.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure I want to see this.
Steve Burke is among the taxpayers in Davidson County who we showed these pictures to, and their reactions were all the same.
You got to be kidding me.
Photographs of employees paid by the state not just nodding off, but sleeping. I mean, really sleeping.
And this one right here looked like he is really enjoying his nap at work. That's terrible.
And they're sleeping inside the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institution, assigned to watch over, care for, and guard some of the most vulnerable patients in the state's care. Employees like this registered nurse out cold, right at a nurse's station. There's no question where this psychiatric tech is taking a snooze while on the job. What better place than, again, right there at the nurse's station?
I mean, I wish I could get paid to sleep too.
And they go on and on. Another psychiatric tech asleep. Another psychiatric tech asleep.
It's lazy. I mean, that's all I can say.
And while these three are not responsible for anyone's lives, you still paid their salaries. Here are 3 photographs of housekeepers sleeping in all different parts of the Institute. But this guy was responsible for lives because he was a security guard. Here he is sleeping inside, and his personnel file shows he was also busted for sleeping outside in a security vehicle while on duty in 2007, and that's when he admitted he had a sleeping disorder.
Anything could be happening, and they're asleep on their job.
And there's more. Disciplinary actions obtained through a public records request by the Channel 4 I-Team show that the state is well aware of the problem. Employee after employee after employee, all cited for sleeping on the job. And none of these people disciplined are the ones captured in these photographs. Additional employees assigned to watch over patients who needed intensive observation or constant observation, disciplined for falling asleep.
Do you worry about the safety of the patients there right now?
Yes.
Michael Rhodes and Tyler Nelson are 2 recent employees of the Institute who agreed, independent of each other, to speak to the Channel 4 I-Team about what they say these photographs captured.
It's just a culture of irresponsibility and negligence.
Every night was on that unit, I can hear him down there snoring, like you can hear him snoring loudly from way up at the desk.
And both say there's such a problem with employees sleeping that some have found a place to hide out of range of the cameras that monitor the hallways. Rhodes even drew for us what a hallway looks like and the small alcoves where he says employees hide in order to sleep and not get caught by the cameras.
So they get in there and lean up against the patient's door in a chair, and the cameras, they're out of view of the camera.
There are some employees that will find a good hiding spot. They'll go into the employee break room and sleep.
Why won't you talk to me about what happened to the patients here?
After our first attempts to interview both the CEO of the institution and the commissioner of the State Department of Mental Health, we again asked for an interview and were again denied. But a state spokesman did confirm these photographs are of either former or current state employees or contract employees paid by the state. and that in this woman's case, quote, MTMHI will take appropriate action to follow up to remind techs that they must be alert while on duty. The spokesman said employees are permitted to, quote, rest during breaks in the break room, but, quote, it cannot be determined from the pictures whether or not the employees are sleeping or if they are on duty. These employees say what's the most concerning is that the majority of the sleeping happens during the overnight hours, the same time period as we uncovered in our first investigation when patient Cody Skelton was left alone long enough to take his own life.
A lot of things that shouldn't be going on are going on.
We attempted to reach out to all of the workers you just saw in those photographs. 2 of them are current employees of the Institute, and they denied our request for an interview. The others either did not want to talk or no longer had listed phone numbers.
Okay, here's a question. So if the state is okay for the employees to rest, say, in the break room, is there anybody responsible for waking them up?
That's a great question, Tom. I asked the same question to them. Does rest mean sleeping? Who's going to wake you up? We're still waiting to get those answers. For the first time, one of the nurses who discovered the patient's body is speaking out, saying this death should serve as a wake-up call for the state.
It was a traumatic experience.
Of everything Derwin Powell saw in his 16 months working for the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute, being the first to discover the body of Cody Skelton was the most disturbing.
When I seen the sight, anger immediately came over me. My first thought was, who had this patient?
Powell was a contract nurse for the Institute and says a psychiatric technician employed by the state was supposed to be checking on Cody every 15 minutes.
I think the patient could have been left alone for several hours, possibly 4.
Powell says Cody's death is a direct result of the institution cutting back on what's called one-to-one supervision, where an employee constantly monitors a patient. Former and current staff say what the I-team uncovered happening in the Institute, from Cody's death to mistreatment of other patients, is the result of budget cuts to staff. The I-team found between 2009 and 2010, 53 staff positions have been eliminated at the institution.
Well, I think it tells us that there isn't enough staff at MTMHI, that they have had to cut training, that they've had to cut supervision.
Sita Deal with the National Association on Mental Illness saw our investigation and says Cody's death is proof of the deadly ramifications on budget cuts to state mental institutions.
He's the canary in the mine. You know, he is what we are afraid of. And we have to tell the legislators, unless they wake up and smell the coffee, we're going to have more of this.
Powell says he and 9 other contract nurses who were not assigned to monitor Cody were still terminated as a result. He says the institution took that action knowing Cody's family is angry. His message to Cody's family?
I would say that you don't have the right to be mad, you have the right to be pissed.
The state will not confirm the firings of the contract employees or if any state employees have been fired as a result of this.
Lawmakers sent a direct message to state employees today who care for the mentally ill. That statement, if you neglect patients, you could be fired on the spot without any chance to appeal. It comes after a Channel 4 I-team investigation that found neglect of patients at the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. Channel 4's chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley was there this morning for that hearing. And what have you found out?
Well, Tom, as we continue to investigate this institution, we are finding cases of employees who are caught neglecting or mistreating patients allowed to keep their jobs. And one lawmaker and former employees who saw our investigation say what we uncovered shows that there must be a change in punishment at that institution. A nurse dumps a bucket of water on a mentally ill patient's head. Her punishment, a 3-day suspension. Another nurse is found with her hands around a patient's neck, and the patient ends up on the floor. Her punishment, a 5-day suspension. A Channel 4 I-team investigation found it all happening at the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. And Senator Doug Henry says it's proof that the state must have greater powers to fire employees who neglect or mistreat patients.
But when you're talking about helpless people and folks who have direct charge of that person, it seems to me that when they don't do right, management should be able to dismiss them on the spot.
Former contract employees say it's well known in the Institute. If you're a state civil service employee, it's hard to get fired.
Civil service, it shouldn't be in that type of facility, in a psychiatric, because in nursing care, the patients' lives are too valuable.
After Senator Henry saw what the I-Team uncovered, he called the Commissioner of Mental Health into his office. And Henry says the commissioner wanted to fire all of the employees we exposed, but couldn't because of civil service rules protecting their employment. So Henry drafted an amendment to the bill revamping the civil service law that would make all state employees providing patient care at institutions at-will employees. They could be fired for a single violation of neglect or abuse.
If somebody is mistreated and they're in direct control of that patient, I don't have a great deal of patience with them.
A spokesman for the Department of Mental Health sent us a statement today reading they support the bill to revamp the civil service laws. And Senator Henry's amendment passed today and is now attached to that bill.
A man who has struggled his whole life with mental illness is accused of killing another man.
But his family says the state could have prevented it. Police say Thaddeus Odom beat another patient to death inside the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. The Channel 4 I-Team was first to report on a number of serious problems inside that facility, including patients being left unsupervised and workers falling asleep on the job. And tonight, Odom's family is telling the I-Team the staff didn't do enough to protect him or the man he's accused of killing. Our chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley is here with an exclusive interview.
Well, the family of Thaddeus Odom contacted me after they saw our ongoing investigation into problems at the Institute. Even though police say it appears Odom killed his fellow patient James Hodge while staff was nearby, Odom's family wonders if more could have been done to prevent that death.
Thaddeus Odom's family doesn't like his police mugshot. They say, look at his eyes, his mouth. It's a picture of a man, they say, lost in the paranoid schizophrenia that's haunted him since his 20s.
Thad is really not a very violent person.
But he is the person accused of killing his fellow patient, James Hodge, inside the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. Even though the family admits they don't know what happened, they do have lots of questions about the care both men received.
I just have a gut feeling that there's a lot more to this than what's being told.
Metro Police say after 2 a.m. on April 19th, Odom and Hodge got into a fight, were put in separate rooms, but kept on the same floor of the building. 4 hours later, police say Odom saw Hodge leave his room, followed him into a day room, and attacked him, beating Hodge to death. Police say staff were nearby and rushed to Hodge's aid. And Odom's family questions why, after their first fight, the staff didn't move them to different floors, and why they were kept in such close contact that Odom could see Hodge walk away from his room.
And instead of them monitoring them to try to keep up what was going on, they just left it alone.
And it's the time that it happened that concerns the Odom family too, between 2 and 6 a.m., the night shift. The same shift where the Channel 4 I-Team uncovered photographs of some staff sleeping instead of caring for patients, and when Cody Skelton was left alone long enough to take his own life. Joseph Odom says 2 deaths in a state facility in just 7 months is too much.
They just failed to take care of what they needed to take care of to meet the patient's need.
How many staff members were working that night? Were staff disciplined afterwards for any reason? Well, the state won't discuss their internal investigations, and a spokesman for the Institute didn't respond to my request for information today. But as we continue to do, we'll keep filing open records requests, which has over the past few months given us some real answers as to problems at the Institute.
Just 9 days after police say a patient killed another at a state mental institution, the Channel 4 I-Team has learned of another death inside the same facility.
It marks the 3rd death in recent years. They're uncovered by the Channel 4 I-Team. Now, the I-Team started investigating when it discovered how one man died there in November. His family says he was left alone long enough to take his own life. Here's our chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley now with the latest.
Well, this is the same facility where those photos were taken that we showed you last night of the employees asleep on the clock. Well, tonight, a patient's family is suing the state, blaming the institute for their loved one's death in 2007, saying the lack of treatment and observation their brother was given resulted in his death. And it comes as we've obtained more than a dozen additional disciplinary actions taken against staff for leaving patients unsupervised and, in one case, free to even wander away from the institute.
He could light up a room.
This is David Keel feeling good, lighting up the stage.
The grin that he had, it was priceless.
But like so many who suffer from bipolar disease, when he felt bad, the light went out.
David was completely catatonic. He would not eat, he couldn't speak.
In June of 2007, he was admitted to the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. Roughly a month later, at just 27 years old, he was dead.
I thought, how and why?
After all, David hadn't committed suicide. An autopsy raised serious questions. Cause of death, deep venous thrombosis of a leg, a blood clot. It stunned the family. According to a complaint filed against the state, prior to being admitted to the institute, David was prescribed a blood thinner to prevent blood clots because of his catatonic state and obesity. The complaint states the institute failed to administer an appropriate blood thinning medication.
Had they have done that, my baby brother would still be with me.
And what they found out next angered the family even more. According to the complaint, David was often observed in the institute spending 16 hours or more laying in bed or on the floor. His family says David dropped more than 30 pounds in 43 days. It all added up, according to the complaint, to the institute failing to properly monitor David.
And he wasn't watched and observed like he should have been.
So when Lisa Crouch saw the Channel 4 I-Team investigation that showed patient Cody Skelton left alone long enough to take his own life inside the institute, she couldn't believe it.
I fully understand what his family's going through because he never should have died in a mental facility either.
Aren't you sorry?
Neither the CEO of the institute nor the commissioner of the State Department of Mental Health would comment because of the pending litigation. But in filings, the state's attorney wrote that David laid in bed a lot, but not for 16 hours, that the family never informed the institute of any blood thinner medication, and that he was constantly observed. David's case is not the first time we've learned of accusations of patients being left alone. In February, when we uncovered cases of nurses disciplined, one for not checking on a patient for an hour, and another for losing a patient within the institution, we asked the Commissioner of Mental Health about them. Are there other examples of this happening?
Our staff do a great job at the hospital. These were isolated incidents.
But a Channel 4 I-Team investigation found they were hardly isolated incidents. After requesting all disciplinary actions in a 3-year period, we found 13 additional cases of employees at the institute cited for failing to monitor patients, many who needed constant attention. One patient was left alone long enough to start a fire. Another patient was unmonitored for 4 hours. And in one case, a patient was forgotten about, left the institute, and made it all the way to a gas station almost a mile away from the hospital. The patient was found with red scratches on his face and stated he had felt like pulling his eyes out. A state spokesman says they cannot discuss any of the cases because of patient confidentiality. Crouch says everything we've uncovered, from the deaths, the patients being left unmonitored, the photographs of sleeping employees inside, show there should be changes within the institute.
I do not want another family to have to go through what my family's been through.
So we can show you the 3 people who have died in the institute that we know of. Here they are. David Keel's family is suing the state. Cody Skelton's family has hired an attorney. And the family of James Hodge, who died there 9 days ago after being beaten by a patient, told me this week they are considering all their options. We've also obtained these 2 additional lawsuits from families of former patients who died after leaving the facility. They too blame the institute for a lack of care or negligence that they say later resulted in their loved one's death.
After everything the Channel 4 team has already exposed at the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute, what you're about to see raises the question, how can this still be happening? Over the past 7 months, the I-team has revealed everything from patient deaths to photographs of state employees sleeping inside the institution instead of caring for patients.
So the fact that more employees are still sleeping and more patients have been put at risk raises a lot of additional questions. Here's our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley, now with the latest.
Well, with the state continuing to refuse to comment on anything we've exposed, our greatest tool to keep tabs on what's going on inside the states is the state's public records law. But we've also received internal reports from a source inside the institute. And that's how we've learned of more employees sleeping and more patients put at risk when no one's watching them. Of everyone that crosses this railroad just a mile away from the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute, staff was stunned to see a mentally ill patient on the tracks. This internal incident report, dated just 7 days ago, shows the shirtless patient was spotted on the tracks and at the NES building nearby. There's no explanation of how he got outside. And this internal report, dated June 29th, shows a patient snuck into the medication room and stole medicine. The patient was later found with bags of medicine and ingested hundreds of milligrams of pills. And you might think after the Channel 4 team exposed photos of employees sleeping inside would stop other workers from doing the same thing. But again and again and again, disciplinary records obtained by the I-team show after we aired the photos, employees continue to be busted for sleeping on the job, their patients unmonitored. Do you think that there is a real problem at this institution?
The fact that you've uncovered these instances would say that there's a problem.
We first aired these photographs on April 26th. 7 days later, a psychiatric tech was found asleep instead of observing a mentally ill patient who he was supposed to be watching constantly. 10 days after that, another psychiatric tech who was also supposed to be constantly watching a patient instead was found asleep. And yet another report from April shows a psych tech was found asleep outside a patient's room and the patient's bathroom was unlocked. So why is that last incident so troubling? As we first told you in February, patient Cody Skelton drowned himself because his bathroom was unlocked. And as we've repeatedly told you, neither the State Department of Mental Health nor the Institute itself will comment. But a spokesman was not pleased when we sent him a copy of the patient escape report, writing in an email, quote, "As the document you forwarded violates both state and federal privacy laws, we cannot comment." Roger Stewart with the National Alliances on Mental Illness says everything the Channel 4 team has uncovered shows the state is punishing employees, but it appears not to be doing enough to prevent the problems.
What we want to see is a concentration, an emphasis on prevention rather than discipline.
But it appears the state is trying to prevent another death at the hands of a patient. Last month, the institution's management of patients at risk changed, including a new procedure called management of patient aggression. In April, patient Thaddeus Odom got into a fight with patient James Hodge. The two were left on the same floor afterwards, within eyesight of each other. A few hours later, Odom allegedly murdered Hodge. This new policy now states patients who fight must be placed in different locations within the treatment center. A patient should never, to the extent possible, be in visual range of the other patient or patients involved in the confrontation. Well, the spokesman for the state says that new policy was not developed because of the death of patient James Hodge. Now, you may be wondering, who is it that's inspecting this institution? Well, it's an independent nonprofit called the Joint Commission. They gave the institution a gold seal of certification, but the last time they inspected was last September.
Tonight, following a 10-month I-team investigation, the CEO has resigned. Here's the latest now from our chief investigative reporter, Jeremy Finley.
Well, while the state confirmed Candace Gilligan resigned, a spokesman would not confirm if she was forced to resign. It comes just 1 day after the commissioner of the Department of Mental Health, which oversees the institute, spoke to the Channel 4 I-team for the first time about everything we've uncovered. Miss Gilligan? When we first tried to speak with Candace Gilligan, she wasn't interested in talking. Ma'am, please let me talk to you about what happened.
Talk to you, sorry.
And the state isn't saying much tonight either about why she turned in her resignation today. A spokesman would only say it came after discussions between herself and the commissioner of the Department of Mental Health, Doug Varney.
I really don't have a comment to make. Thank you.
Varney has declined all of my requests for interviews as well, following months of Channel 4 I-Team investigations into the Institute. Our investigations revealed the questionable surroundings of the deaths of patients, including Cody Skelton, who was left alone long enough to drown himself inside his bathroom. The Channel 4 I-Team also documented cases of mistreatment of patients wandering away from the Institute, and these photographs of employees sleeping inside the facility instead of watching patients. While Varney wouldn't speak to me, he did agree yesterday to interview with the Channel 4 I-Team's Kimberly Kurth.
What has been done to make sure employees are not sleeping on the job?
Anytime we have any concern about an employee not being diligent in their duty, we act on that, and again, we did in those cases too.
Varney says after Skelton's death, they brought in 2 outside independent reviews, and while multiple employees were later fired, here's what he said the auditors determined.
And there were not any major findings or areas of concern.
Some families have told us that their loved ones are not safe at the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. How would you respond to that?
I think we do an amazingly good job. Does that mean we're perfect? No. Does that mean sometimes we fail? We're dealing with very difficult cases.
Varney did not mention in his interview with Kimberly Kurth yesterday that Gilligan planned to resign today, so we didn't get to ask him about that. He did say in a prepared statement tonight, "I appreciate all the hard work and dedicated service shown by Candace Gilligan during her 3+ years as CEO of MTMHI and nearly 10 years working with this department." Now, guys, we have asked for a copy of her resignation letter, but as you know, sometimes these letters say very little, sometimes they say a lot. We're hoping to get that tomorrow.
People once accused of violent crimes are living in neighborhoods just like yours tonight, and they're being sent there by the state. The Channel 4 I-Team found case after case of mental patients going missing after being released to homes with almost no security. Channel 4's Kimberly Kurth is here now with her investigation.
We started looking into this when accused killer Kenneth Malady escaped from a group home in July. Police say he beat up a store clerk while on the run, but we found his case wasn't unique. And tonight we're asking, why are many of these potentially violent people being released into neighborhoods? Metro Police Sergeant Morgan Ford still has the scars.
I was very fortunate that I didn't lose consciousness, but if I had, it could have been life-threatening.
She says she might not be alive today if she didn't call for backup on the day she tried to capture mental patient Sylvia Black.
She grabbed me by the top of my head and got a handful of my hair, and we all went down to the ground. She outweighed me by about 150 pounds. The first thing I did was touch my face, and I felt a large knot and blood coming out of my eye.
A court decided Black was insane when she attacked Sergeant Ford and sent her to the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. But the institute released her to a group home, and she escaped twice.
I would, be leery of anybody that has any kind of encounter with her.
And our Channel 4 I-Team investigation found she's not the only one to walk away. Prosecutors say this system does allow dangerous people to get back on the street.
You cannot monitor them enough.
The Channel 4 I-Team uncovered in just the last year at least 6 mental patients have walked away from care homes chosen for them by the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute after being found not guilty by reason of insanity of a crime. At least one of them released was an accused murderer, and 4 of those 6 patients are accused of assaulting someone after walking away from their group home. And this prosecutor says there's more.
We have here in Davidson County 1 or more individuals who many years ago have committed homicides and have been found not guilty by reason of insanity. 1 or 2 have been released to a group home. We walk around with our fingers crossed every day that there's not going to be, a recurrence.
The Channel 4 I-Team reviewed 28 case files of people found not guilty by reason of insanity in Nashville courts since 2010. 25 went to the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute for treatment. Only 7 of those patients are still in the institution, according to their court records. The rest were released, put in the care of family and friends, or sent to live in a group home. There are at least 45 mental health care homes in Davidson County alone. The state tells us 27 of those are used for patients found not guilty of a crime by reason of insanity. Most of them are in the middle of neighborhoods with no signs and no warning given to neighbors about who could be living there. Amina O'Day didn't know she lived on the same Antioch street as an accused murderer and paranoid schizophrenic until Kenneth Malady went missing in July. Malady was charged with stabbing his mother to death with a pocket knife and gouging his stepfather's eyes, but a court found him not guilty of the murder by reason of insanity. He ended up in O'Day's neighborhood.
If that happens, as it did, I think we had a right to be notified.
In July, Malady left Ann's care home and went on the run for days. Police say he beat up a store clerk and threatened to kill the park ranger who finally caught him, about 40 miles away in Marshall County.
I know that he's capable of murder. He killed his own mother and he attempted to kill our stepfather as well.
Malady's own sister thought he would be in the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute for good until she learned he had been sent to live in a home in the middle of Antioch.
To me, he should never have been considered a candidate for the furlough program.
The operators of Ann's care home told an appeals court Malady would be supervised around the clock. So how is it Malady and these 5 other patients walked away from their group homes? We took our findings to Commissioner Doug Varney of the Department of Mental Health, which oversees the institution.
These are not secure facilities. They're not locked facilities. Again, if that was required, they wouldn't be discharged from the hospital. They would be kept in the hospital, which is a more secure facility.
Then why are violent people like Kenneth Malady being placed in the community in a group home?
Yeah. It's determined by a court and or a jury that these people were not guilty of any crime because of their mental illness.
Varney says institutionalized patients are only released into care homes when their doctors determine they are stable, and those patients are released with a plan for continuing mental care. But remember Sylvia Black, charged with beating up the police officer? Even after she walked away from her care home once, the institute sent her back. She left again and has been picked up by police 9 times since the attack on the officer. And we wanted to know all about those 6 escapes we told you about in the past year, but the state will not release specifics, citing privacy laws. This is just the latest investigation the I-Team has conducted into the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute's handling and supervision of patients. The CEO of the Institute, Candace Gilligan, resigned after our investigations. We haven't been given a reason for her stepping down.